She says she wants safety, but only after you've made her bleed for it. The soft hand is tolerated, not touched. The faithful man is kept warm, not desired. She sits across from you with her eyes full of approval, and you feel a strange nausea, because you know something has died. Not love, not trust, but the hunt. She cannot long for what does not wound her. She cannot submit to what does not break her rhythm. The cage she craves is the one that shimmers with danger, with the possibility of abandonment, with the mad promise you could destroy her, and yet you don't. You gave her loyalty, she felt safe, and in the language of the animal inside her, that meant you are dead. She never mourns what she leaves, she only mourns what never made her tremble. And if that trembling has touched your spine, you already know this whisper is yours. If this voice feels like it remembered you before you were betrayed, let it echo. Like the video. Leave your shadow in the comments. Subscribe and stay near the silence. Her hatred never rises from cruelty, only from the softness she begged for. You gave her everything she said she wanted, and she began to rot in front of you. Not in her beauty that was untouched, but in the way she stopped searching for you. The way her gaze, once sharp enough to slice through silence, now softened into apathy. It is a quiet execution, this feminine retreat. Not a scream, not a slap, but the slow removal of meaning. You watched her eyes become mirrors without reflection, and you stood there, holding the crown she once asked you to wear. You didn't know it had thorns. You believed that gentleness would save her, that empathy, warmth, understanding all the things she wept for in her moments of despair would become the sanctuary she would finally call home. But her soul is not built for safety, it is built for fire. When you gave her shelter, she mistook it for submission. When you gave her peace, she labeled it passivity. You saw her pain and offered healing, but healing, for her, was a slow starvation. She feeds on storms. You tried to become her comfort. You lowered your voice. You silenced your hunger. You became the man who waits, not the man who takes. And in doing so, you vanished. She didn't kill you. She just stopped feeling you. That's the cruelty no one speaks of, the cruelty of the absence. The cruelty of being looked at like wallpaper, familiar, harmless, forgotten. She does not hate the man who bruises her soul. She hates the man who gently protects it because he reminds her she's already caged. She will never tell you the truth. Not because she's lying, but because she doesn't know the language of her own instincts. She will say, "You're so good to me," but her body leans away. She will say, "I feel safe with you," but her fingers no longer search for yours. She will say, "I could marry you," and yet when she dreams, it is always of the one who vanished, the one who laughed at her threats, the one who could leave at any moment, but didn't. Not the soft one, the dangerous one who chose not to break her. You became the man who folded. You thought she would reward your sacrifice. But a woman does not crave the lamb, she craves the wolf who spares her. And you, in your desperation to be kind, stopped being a man she could lose. That is the hidden contract of desire she must always feel, deep beneath her calm expression, that you could walk away, that you could disappear into legend, that your presence is not a favor, but a choice. Without that fear, she feels nothing. You thought kindness was virtue. You thought restraint was love. But in her world, safety is a coffin. The more you gave, the less you became. Until one morning, you woke up beside her and realized she had already left. Maybe not with her body, but with her soul. And she left not because you hurt her, but because you didn't. She left because the kindness became predictable, and the predictable became invisible. She was never addicted to your care. She was addicted to the risk that your care could vanish. That is the secret rhythm of her blood. The pulse that makes her heart race is not love. It is the possibility of love being lost. You removed that risk. You gave her certainty, and in that certainty, her desire bled out in silence. Not with a scream, but with the quiet betrayal of stillness. That is how she punishes you by no longer trembling in your arms. She asked you for softness, but her soul punishes softness. She said she wanted stability, but she punishes stability. She said she wanted you to be the one who stays, and when you stayed, she punished you for not leaving. Because in staying, you proved you were no longer dangerous, no longer divine, no longer capable of surprising her with your darkness. And without darkness, what is a man? A statue, a pillow, a ghost. She loved you more when you didn't belong to her. That's the paradox that cuts deepest. She longed for you before you gave yourself away. In every glance, she saw potential, not presence. Once you gave her your soul, she buried it, not out of cruelty, not out of malice, but because it no longer provoked her. She needs the possibility of your withdrawal more than your devotion. She needs the unknown in you, not the known. You wonder if you could have done it differently, if you could have balanced danger with love, mystery with warmth. But the truth is brutal. The moment you gave her everything, she saw nothing, because she only sees what trembles, and your love no longer trembled. It stood still, it bowed, it waited, and nothing makes her more silently vicious than a man who waits to be needed. She doesn't want to mother you, she wants to marvel at you. She doesn't want your apology, she wants your indifference, the kind that hides a blade, not a wound. She doesn't want reassurance, she wants the high-stakes risk of wondering if she's enough. And when you offered her your whole heart without price, she left, looking for someone who would make her pay again. You will not find her in the soft places. You will find her at the edge of cliffs, staring down into the danger she claims to despise. She walks into chaos, not because she is broken, but because it makes her feel. You tried to soothe her, but soothing is the lullaby of death. She needs the crash, the confrontation, the man who stands without trembling when she rages, the man who walks out of the room when she tests him, the man who does not ask to be loved but demands to be remembered. And now she has forgotten you, not out of spite, but because you obeyed. You gave her everything, and she buried it beneath her hunger. You became the man who asked nothing, and in doing so, became no one. That is the crown you wore, a crown made of every rose she wanted to touch, until she saw there were no thorns left. You removed the thorns to please her, and she left, bleeding from a wound she couldn't name because it wasn't you who hurt her. It was the absence of danger that did. She chases depth, but only worships the man she cannot fully understand. She said, "Tell me everything," but only so she could stop wanting you. She said, "Be honest," but honesty became your undoing, not because it revealed darkness, but because it revealed predictability. You gave her the map of your mind, thinking she would cherish it. But women do not long for what is familiar. They long for what remains slightly out of reach, the unspoken sentence behind your lips, the locked room in your heart, the question you refuse to answer. The moment she understands you, she stops believing in you. She needs to wonder to stay alive in the story. Not wonder as in awe, but wonder as in uncertainty, suspicion, tension, the sacred distance between two souls that never fully merge, only orbit. You closed that space too soon. You confessed too early. You unfolded yourself like a diary left in the rain, and she read until there was nothing left to chase. She was not looking for your truth. She was looking for the man who could refuse her the truth, not cruelly, but with the noble arrogance of someone whose inner world does not beg to be understood. You made yourself known, and she loved you less. That's the mirror. That's the fracture. The tragedy is not that she left, it's that she had no choice. Once your soul became an open window, the wind died, the drama vanished, the myth collapsed, and she no longer saw you, not because you changed, but because you became solvable. She never wanted a solution. She wanted an echo, a myth, a man she could interpret, not possess. You think connection means full disclosure, but connection, for her, means selective mystery. She wants a man whose presence feels layered, not evasive, but elusive. A man whose silence doesn't signal shame, but sacred privacy. The difference is everything. One makes her withdraw, the other makes her ache. When she says, "Be vulnerable," she doesn't mean surrender everything. She means show me that you bleed, but never how you stop the bleeding. The moment she sees your coping, your habits, your method, she loses reverence. And reverence is the only thing that keeps her flame alive. She will endure pain, humiliation, even betrayal if it's in service of a man she cannot fully contain. But she will abandon ease. She will abandon serenity. She will abandon you the moment she can anticipate every word before you speak. The moment she knows your childhood wounds, your spiritual vocabulary, your emotional weather. That's not intimacy to her. That's dissolution. The collapse of the sacred mirror she once believed could show her something greater. She must feel smaller beside you, not because you belittle her, but because you mirror something she hasn't conquered in herself. You mirrored your softness, your trauma, your openness. But she didn't come to you to find herself. She came to lose herself in someone stronger, not stronger in domination, but in opacity. A man whose mind is not a kitchen drawer she can rearrange. A man whose emotions are real, but not raw meat on the table. A man who bleeds discreetly without inviting her pity, without asking her to mother him, without making her feel like the safer one. She doesn't want to be the safe one. She wants to be tested, not with violence, not with cruelty, but with the sublime tension of not knowing where she stands. That's the mirror she kneels before. That's the altar she returns to, the reflection that resists her control. She wants to catch glimpses of you in the dark, a flicker of chaos in your calm, a trace of silence in your desire, a sense that you are not finished, not explainable, not hers. You thought becoming hers was the goal. You thought offering your soul would crown you king, but it dethroned you. Because she does not want a man who collapses into her. She wants a man who carries his own throne even if she never sits beside him. That throne is built from secrecy, from withheld stories, from the sacred geometry of knowing what not to reveal. You had no geometry. You poured yourself out, and she drank until it was just water, until you were just another man telling her things she didn't want to know. She said, "I want depth." And you believed she meant vulnerability, but depth, to her, is the vertigo of not knowing. Depth is walking beside you, sensing storms behind your smile. Depth is realizing that even when you say, "I'm fine," she can't be sure. You ruined her depth by spelling it out. You explained your dreams. You shared your fears. You told her everything, and in doing so, you dissolved your shadow. She saw the wiring behind the magic, the puppet strings, and even though you were honest, she felt betrayed because she didn't want reality. She wanted the symbol of your reality, the shape of your soul, without dissecting it. She wanted the poetry, not the spreadsheet. She wanted the music of your silence, not the lyrics of your struggle. And once you gave her the lyrics, the music stopped. You became her friend, her comfort, her confessional. But you stopped being her mystery. You stopped being the mirror she couldn't control. And that, more than anything, is what made her leave. Now she walks beside someone else, someone less kind, less transparent, less articulate, and yet her eyes burn brighter. Her texts come quicker, her body leans forward, because that man, unlike you, is not explainable. He gives her nothing she can predict. He says little, he disappears. He holds himself like a myth, and even though he wounds her, she stays, because she does not want clarity. She wants the tension of never being sure if the mirror will crack or reflect her madness back at her. And you are left with your honesty, your kindness, your vivid emotional language, and the ruin of a woman who once said, "I just want someone I can understand." You gave her what she asked for, and in doing so, you vanished from her hunger, because her hunger is not for understanding, it is for elevation. The sacred submission of a woman who cannot quite decode the man before her. A man she can't reduce, a man she can't fix, a man who speaks in riddles not to manipulate, but because he lives in a world she hasn't entered yet. You were not cruel, you were not fake, you were sincere, open, generous, and that was your death sentence, because she doesn't want the whole truth. She wants the glint of a sword she never sees fully unsheathed. She will betray heaven itself to kneel at the feet of danger as long as it doesn't kneel back. She says she wants peace, but she prays for the man who can shatter her peace without touching her. She tells her friends she's looking for commitment, stability, a future, and still, she burns her own altar the moment the flame of danger flickers in another man's gaze. Not the danger of harm, but the danger of freedom. That is what seduces her. The man who doesn't need her, who doesn't flinch when she pulls away, who doesn't rearrange himself like furniture just because her mood changes. The man who is risk embodied, who knows he can lose her and yet doesn't lower himself to beg. This is the God she truly worships. Not the man who brings flowers to her doorstep, not the man who folds himself around her pain, but the man who lets her storm rage and remains unmoved. The one she cannot predict, the one she cannot control. She kneels not out of love, but out of helpless awe, not because he threatens her, but because his indifference speaks louder than any promise. You once tried to be this God, but you kneeled first. You bent to win her favor. You showed up on time, texted back immediately, asked her how she felt, softened your voice when she cried. You made her the center of your orbit, and in doing so, you proved something fatal, that you were willing to descend for her, that your divinity was negotiable, that your presence could be earned, bartered for, softened. She didn't despise you, she just stopped trembling in your shadow. What she truly loves, what her bones recognize, is danger without cruelty. A man who holds the sword and never unsheathes it. A man who can disappear without explanation. A man who walks away in silence, not to punish, but because he simply chooses not to stay. That kind of man, cold with purpose. Not resentment is the altar her instincts bow before, because he reminds her that she is not the final test, that his soul cannot be devoured, that his throne is not shared. And here is the cruelty of her longing. She will cry over your absence, even as she desires it. She will rage against your distance, even as it binds her to you. She will beg for closeness, then ache the moment you give it, because the very act of giving collapses the illusion. The moment you reach for her, she realizes you've already fallen. The mystery is dead. The god has come down from the mountain, and now he smells like apology, like devotion, like a man trying not to lose her. And that is when she begins to lose herself. You thought your loyalty would protect the connection, but she doesn't fall in love with protection. She falls in love with the risk of not being enough. The wild heartbeat that says he could leave, not because he's cruel, but because he can. She needs to believe your soul is bigger than her body, that your silence has nothing to do with insecurity and everything to do with command. And if you ever show her the blueprint of your longing, she will tear it up, not because she hates you, but because she cannot kneel before a man who kneels first. She needs to feel like a trespasser, not a homeowner, like a thief in the temple, not the priestess who belongs. That's how risk enters her bloodstream, through the fear of not being chosen again. You remove that fear, and she grows numb, not peaceful numb. Her body obeys, her voice repeats the words, but her soul goes somewhere else, because her soul, wild and unsentimental, does not want the contract. It wants the gamble, and the moment you made her feel safe, she bet on another man without even knowing why. You were her sanctuary, but she left. Because sanctuaries are for the dying, she needed danger to feel alive. And you, in your earnest attempts to love her purely, gave her everything but danger. You loved her without mystery, without distance, without fire, and she walked toward the one who never smiled, who never explained, who stayed on the edge of her understanding, and therefore stayed in her bloodstream. You were better in every way, and still he held her attention, because he held the power to vanish. She will destroy what is good if it doesn't make her burn. She will betray what is safe if it does not haunt her. She will sacrifice her future for one more night of uncertainty, just to feel the primal high of not being sure she is wanted. And then, when the man she chooses hurts her, she will crawl back to you, not to return but to remember what she left, to test if you are still kneeling. And if you are, she will smile, thank you, and vanish again. Not because she is cruel, but because your stillness confirms what she already feared. You never left the altar. You were always there, waiting, willing, open, and that is why she cannot respect you. Not because you are weak, but because you are known. There is no danger in a man who never leaves. There is no divinity in a man who never withholds. There is no fear in a man who always stays. The sacred is not soft, it is not kind, it is unreachable. The sacred cannot be summoned. It appears and disappears like a storm with its own laws. That's who she loves. That's who she dreams about when you're holding her, whispering everything she once asked to hear. You wanted her soul, you offered yours. But her soul is not a gift you are given. It is a temple you trespass. And only when she fears your exit does she reveal her real prayer. Only when she senses that you could walk away, not out of rage, not out of pettiness, but out of sheer freedom, does she offer the one thing you begged for herself. And only for a moment, because gods do not dwell, they pass, and she worships the passing. You thought love meant arrival, but love, for her, is the brief flicker before the arrival, the space between the knock and the door opening, the heartbeat before the kiss, the terror that she might never be enough. That's where her passion lives, in the abyss of maybe, not the comfort of yes. You said yes too soon, too often, too loudly, and so she silenced you with her exit. You became a memory before you even realized you were fading, and somewhere, even now, she's watching a man who doesn't text back, a man who hasn't said I love you, a man who walks with silence in his bones and danger in his eyes, and she tells herself it's wrong, it's foolish, it's unsafe. But still, she lights a candle every night, not for peace, not for security, not for safety, but for him, the one she cannot name, the one who never kneeled. You stood at the altar with open hands, and she vanished. You built her a temple, and she returned only to burn it. You gave her heaven, and she ran toward the storm. Now the wind has no scent. The silence has no answer, Only this question remains. Hovering like smoke, would she have stayed if you had never offered to?